My fiancé ran off with my stepsister a week before our wedding while I rebuilt my life and business. So I left them begging now. I, a 28 female, was engaged to my boyfriend from college about 4 years ago. We had been together all through college and then got engaged when I was 23. We were engaged for a year, but a week before our wedding, he ran off with my stepsister. My ex-fiancé Greg, 28 male, and my stepsister Melissa, 28 female, eloped right before we were supposed to get married and left nothing but a letter for me, where Greg admitted that he had started an affair with Melissa a couple of months after we got engaged. He said he'd realized he couldn't marry me because it would be unfair to both of us, and to Melissa, since they were the ones truly in love. He claimed he believed the universe had simply used me to guide him toward his real soulmate, so he couldn't stay with me anymore and cheat all of us out of a happy future by going through with the wedding. And that was it. They ran away, and I didn't see them again until recently. Greg's parents covered the entire cost of the wedding, so I didn't have to pay a cent because they were so embarrassed by what their son had done. But that was basically the last interaction I had with his family, since there was nothing left to talk about. My own family, however, was more than embarrassed. My parents were furious, and my father even considered hiring a private investigator to track the two of them down and drag them home for answers. Just so you know, my father is technically my stepdad, but he has been my dad since I was very little. I've always called him my father because, to me, he's the only one I've ever had. My biological father left shortly after I was born, and my mom never saw him again after he signed away his rights. They were never married. She married my dad when I was 8 years old. Melissa and I went to the same school, which is how our parents met each other. But for some reason, Melissa decided she didn't like me and went on to treat me badly for the next several years. She was a bully in every sense of the word, and she and her friends constantly picked on me at school. It didn't stop when we got home. She always found new chances to make me feel awful. I complained to my parents many times, and they tried to discipline her, but it was never enough. She wasn't even afraid of them, so the bullying continued, and my school years were a complete nightmare because of her and all her friends. Just like my own dad wasn't around, Melissa's biological mother wasn't either. But in her case, it was because her mom had passed away a few years after she was born. Her mother died in the middle of the night from an epileptic episode. So anytime my mom tried to discipline her, Melissa would yell that she had no right to correct her because she wasn't her real mother. And my father tried to get her to stop tormenting me, but nothing worked because she wasn't scared of anything. My parents tried everything, from scolding her to talking gently, but nothing stopped her from picking on me. Sometimes they even threatened to send her away, but she would dare them to do it because she knew they wouldn't follow through. And that was only in middle school. So as time passed, she got worse. By high school, she had already developed several bad habits and was basically a juvenile delinquent. She started smoking and often snuck out of the house to go drinking with her friends, who were just as reckless as she was. It wasn't until she was arrested with them one night for breaking into someone's house while drunk that our parents finally decided to send her away and get her the help she clearly needed. After a few weeks of begging and protesting, my parents finally forced her to go to a rehabilitation center for troubled teens. She wasn't happy about it, but my father was firm and told her that if she wanted to live with us and be part of the family, she had to get better. He couldn't allow her behavior to continue and keep causing trouble for everyone else, since she was becoming a menace to society. She left during our sophomore year and didn't return until after we graduated, since she enrolled in a school near the rehab center and stayed with her aunt. I didn't see her during those couple of years, mostly because I wasn't interested in how my biggest bully was doing. My parents visited her every weekend and always asked if I wanted to come, but my answer was always no. Her friends at school started ignoring me and acted like I didn't exist after she left, which actually made my high school years so much better because I finally wasn't being bullied constantly. Melissa continued her education and therapy, and when she eventually came back, the first thing she did was apologize to me for everything she had put me through. She seemed calmer, and I genuinely thought she'd changed for the better, so I forgave her. We were about to go off to college in a few months anyway, so it didn't really matter. Once we started college, I moved out, and so did she. We only came home for the holidays, and she was much nicer to me after that. And by nicer, I don't mean she acted warm or friendly. I mean she just ignored me instead of picking on me every chance she got, like she used to. Honestly, it was a very welcome change because I'd rather be ignored than bullied. Our parents noticed the shift but didn't force us to get along or act like real sisters because, considering our past, things were already much better. Then I started dating Greg, and after being together for a year, I brought him home for Thanksgiving to introduce him to my parents. Everyone got along really well, and for the first time, even Melissa showed interest in the conversation, which was rare ever since she came back from rehab. She and Greg were actually getting along, and after I started dating him, she began showing more interest in being friends with me and would occasionally reach out just to talk, which she had never done before. I didn't understand what was going on, and I had a small suspicion that maybe she liked Greg. So one day, I decided to just ask her if the real reason she was trying to be friendly with me was because of him, since I was feeling paranoid. She laughed at that and told me it wasn't the case, but Greg had mentioned at our first dinner together what a great relationship he had with his siblings while talking about his family, and that made her rethink how she had been treating me ever since coming back, which is why she was now trying to make amends and improve our relationship. It had nothing to do with Greg directly, but he had acted as the catalyst and made her reflect on our bond. She said she had blamed me for her being sent away for the longest time, but eventually accepted that it hadn't been my fault and that she had brought everything onto herself with her terrible behavior. So it was time to stop punishing me and start genuinely trying to be part of the family again. And that wouldn't happen until she apologized from the bottom of her heart and actively tried to fix our relationship. I'm an emotional fool, and what she said touched me. So like an idiot, I decided to forgive her and be her friend. And I guess that's what hurt the most. She betrayed me after I decided to trust her again. We stayed on decent terms for a long while, and she was genuinely involved in the wedding preparations. I wouldn't say we were best friends, but we definitely weren't as bad as we used to be. While rebuilding things, we met at least once or twice a month and really talked, so by the time I got engaged, we were in a good place. And I had introduced her to Greg properly, too. Before the engagement, whenever we met at family gatherings, they always acted normal, so I never suspected anything because I had no reason to. Even after the engagement, they behaved as if nothing was going on, and not even for a second did it cross my mind that Greg might have feelings for Melissa. It just never occurred to me because Greg put on a really convincing act of loving me while secretly cheating with her. And she was equally convincing at pretending to be my friend, so I didn't find out the truth until it was far too late, and they had already disappeared. My parents wanted to track them down and bring them home, but I convinced them to let it go because I just wanted it all to end. It was already horrible enough that they made a complete fool out of me and ran away a week before my wedding. I didn't want more drama because I was depressed and had nothing left in me. I spent the next couple of weeks doing nothing but working and sleeping because I wanted to avoid dealing with my emotions. My heart was obviously broken, and I was numb, but somehow the worst was still to come. A couple of weeks after my supposed wedding day, I received a postcard from Melissa, and she was in California. But that wasn't even the worst part. She had plastered it with photos of her and Greg, and they looked incredibly happy together. It was clear she was rubbing it in my face because she even mentioned being sorry about the surprise before the wedding, but she wasn't sorry at all. It was just meant to hurt me. That's when I realized she had never truly forgiven me for what happened years ago and still blamed me for her being sent away. And she had never wanted to be my friend in the first place. She had only used me to get close to Greg, and I had trusted her enough to let her use me as a stepping stone. It was a diabolical plan, I'll give her that. For days after she sent that postcard, I couldn't sleep because I felt like I was losing my mind. It was incredibly traumatic, and I had to go to therapy for months to undo some of the damage and work through my trust issues. And the postcard wasn't a one-time thing. She kept sending me postcards of her and Greg for months. It only stopped after about a year because I refused to respond or engage with any of it. Our parents were extremely upset and naturally cut all ties with her after that. They didn't try to reach out again after the first postcard, and that was a huge loss for Melissa because she had been all set to inherit her dad's business. She majored in business partly because she wanted to join him one day, but after what she had done, our father cut ties with her completely and told me I could join him instead because he felt he needed to make up for everything in a big way. But I didn't have a business degree. I was actually a history major, and that had nothing to do with business, so I needed to learn everything from the ground up. My father said it wasn't a problem because he was willing to teach me everything he knew so that I could eventually take over the business instead of Melissa. So I agreed and started working under him, learning how to run the company until he could retire and hand over the reins. I worked very hard for a few years, and last year I was finally promoted, and my father retired. It was an amazing feeling because I had started from scratch and learned everything from the bottom up. But now everything is smooth sailing under me and has been for some time. Thanks to me, my parents can spend more time together without worrying about the business because I'm handling it. It's been this way for quite a while, and I pretty much stopped thinking about Greg after I started working for my father because the job took up all my time. That, along with therapy, helped me move on, and I would say now that I've completely moved on and don't think about them or what they did. I never thought they would ever reach out to me again, let alone ask for help, because it would take an immense amount of nerve and a total lack of functioning brain cells to ask me for anything after they betrayed me, humiliated me, and then rubbed it in. But I guess Melissa and Greg really do lack brain cells because that's exactly what they did a few days ago. I was at home because it was the weekend, and around lunchtime I heard someone frantically ringing my doorbell. I assumed it was the pizza I had ordered, so I didn't think much of it. But when I opened the door, I got the biggest shock of my life, because instead of a delivery guy, Melissa was standing outside my house, looking extremely worried. I didn't know what to say, so I just waited quietly for her to speak. While staring at her, I realized she was definitely here to ask for help because she looked practically destitute, and her appearance made everything obvious. Even as a kid, Melissa always dressed well, but now she was wearing old clothes that were faded and clearly purchased ages ago. Her jeans were far too short, and she looked like she hadn't eaten properly in a long time. I had already decided that whatever she was about to ask, my answer would be no. So when she said she needed my help because she and Greg had been struggling for a long while, I was not surprised. Ever since Greg lost his job a couple of months ago, he had started drinking instead of searching for new work. And even though she had been trying to find a job for herself, she couldn't find anything because she had quit everything to stay home and take care of the household after moving away with Greg. Because of that, she hadn't worked in years, and the gap in her resume made her a weaker candidate for most of the jobs she applied to. She told me she'd heard from a couple of relatives that our father had retired and handed the business over to me, so now she was here asking if I'd be willing to hire Greg and give him something to do. Melissa told me she had come all the way here specifically to ask for help and said she was sorry for whatever she did in the past. She claimed she was counting on me to bail her out. She also told me she hadn't approached our parents yet and had come directly to my house because she believed I had a kind heart. She said she felt terribly guilty about betraying me years ago, but she was sure I wouldn't turn her away now that she needed something. Her entitlement was so ridiculous that I actually laughed in her face and told her to apply somewhere else because I don't hire cheaters. Then I shut the door and went back into the living room, ready to call the cops if she refused to leave my property. Thankfully, she left that day, but she didn't leave me alone for long. After her visit, the first thing I did was call our parents and tell them what happened. They told me they had heard from a couple of their neighbors that Melissa was back in town without Greg, but they hadn't believed it. And since we live in a relatively small town where everyone knows everyone, word spreads quickly. We soon learned that Melissa had been in town for about a week before she showed up at my door and had been staying with one of her high school friends. It was probably that friend who told her where I lived and also mentioned that I had inherited the business that was originally supposed to be hers. A few days after she visited me, Melissa went to see our parents to complain about how heartless I was being. She fully expected them to take her side now that she was the one suffering, but she couldn't have been more wrong because my father told her plainly that the business was mine to run now and that I had complete freedom to make whatever decisions I saw fit. He didn't have any authority over it anymore because he wasn't going to micromanage me. And my mother reminded her that she was the one who had ruined everything by running away with my fiancé after pretending to be my friend for years. They told her she absolutely deserved whatever was happening to her. She had lost the right to ask any of us for help, especially me, after she spent months sending me postcards just to torment me. Melissa tried to defend herself by saying everything happened a long time ago and she was a different person now, but my parents told her to leave because they wanted nothing to do with her anymore. That led to her throwing a tantrum in their house, claiming they had always favored me and treated me like the golden child. She said that despite being their biological daughter, my father had never treated her the same and acted as if I were his only child and she was worthless. When he reminded her that he had made more allowances for her behavior than any other parent would have, she insisted none of that mattered. She said I now had everything she was supposed to have, including the business I was apparently showing off. She claimed it wasn't even her fault that Greg had fallen for her and wanted to spend his life with her instead of me, but for some reason she was the one being punished. She also claimed the postcards she sent were meant to be a genuine apology, and that she wasn't trying to torment me at all. And honestly, I haven't been able to stop thinking about that since my father told me. In a way, it's true the business was originally supposed to be hers, and she would have been in my position if she hadn't sabotaged everything through her own actions. I had no part in that. I never asked my father to cut her out or give the business to me. He made that decision himself, and it feels unfair that she blames me for it. And what she said about me being the golden child isn't true, but I can understand why she feels that way. Because in her head, she was sent away because I reported her bullying. A parent choosing to send their child away is a huge deal, and I know it was painful for her. But again, that wasn't my fault, or my father's fault. If he hadn't taken drastic action, Melissa might have ended up in serious trouble because that's where she was heading. Apart from that, I don't really think she was trying to apologize with those postcards, and was probably just trying to cover it up by saying they were meant as a genuine apology. I just feel bad for her because her husband turned out to be completely useless, and now she has to bail him out. For that reason, she actually came to me, and I can't imagine how difficult that must have been for her, so I kind of regret how I treated her that day. I have everything now, and she has nothing, so I can't help but feel sorry for her. That's just who I am as a person. Besides, it has been a long time, and I don't feel like holding on to that grudge anymore, but I also don't want to help her in any way. The most I can offer is sympathy, but I really don't want to hire them or give them money. I think it's enough that I even feel bad for her after everything she put me through. Most people wouldn't even blink. The only reason I feel bad right now is because the business was supposed to be hers, and now that I'm in a position of authority, it feels like I'm finally getting back at her, and it just doesn't feel right. Maybe it's because of what she said about me being the golden child, or maybe it's just plain imposter syndrome, but the whole thing makes me feel uneasy. So I wondered, was I wrong for refusing to hire my ex-fiancé who ran off with my stepsister, now that they're struggling financially and need help? Update 1. I had no clue what to do, and the comments only confused me even more, because some people said I was right to turn them away, and others insisted I had always been the golden child, which is why Melissa acted out. So that wasn't as helpful as I expected. I decided to talk to my parents because every time I've faced something difficult in life, I've always gone to them for advice. And I did the same this time. They told me I had absolutely no reason to feel sorry for Melissa, because everyone had gone above and beyond to try to make her a better person. But if she wasn't willing to turn her life around at any point, then there wasn't much any of us could do. My father told me he had fully intended to let her take over the business if she had behaved and been a good daughter, but she failed at everything and made a complete mockery of our family. After that, she would be foolish to expect him to let her take over or even be part of the family again. And that made me feel a lot better, because talking to my parents always helps. So I decided I wouldn't let myself feel guilty about things I didn't do anymore. Update 2. About a week passed since Melissa showed up at my door, and after her visit to my parents, we didn't hear from her. I almost thought she had gone back to California to be with Greg, until today, when she showed up at my workplace to make a scene. It was awful because she just strolled into the building since she knew the layout from childhood and got in without setting off any alarms. Then she positioned herself right outside my office and began shouting about how I had stolen the business from under her nose by pretending to be a good little girl for our parents and constantly sucking up to them so they would approve of me. She claimed I was responsible for vilifying her by falsely accusing her of bullying me throughout our childhood, and even manipulating my father into sending her to rehab just so I could secure my place as the golden child of the family. She went on to scream that the business was supposed to be hers, but now I refused to let her be a part of it because I was jealous that Greg had chosen her over me, unlike our parents, who had always favored me. And since I wasn't used to being overlooked, I supposedly lost my mind and turned our parents against her. When I heard all the yelling, I called security, and then went out to check what was happening myself. I tried to tell her to stop, but she kept going for several minutes until she was finally thrown out of the building. I decided to call my dad before calling the police, just to get his opinion, and he was furious. He told me to go ahead and contact the authorities immediately. Thankfully, when the cops showed up, she was still lingering nearby, probably waiting for me to leave the building so she could yell at me again, or maybe even do something worse, like attempt to attack me. The officers took her away and charged her with trespassing and disturbing the peace, but they're minor charges, so she'll likely get off with a fine or community service at most. Worst case scenario, really, but it's definitely going on her record, and that's never good. I told my dad she'd been charged and arrested and expected him to be upset, but he only seemed exhausted and told me he was just tired of dealing with her chaos. I honestly feel bad for him, because it can't be easy having a daughter like Melissa and being blamed for everything that goes wrong in her life, even though most of the time it's her own doing. Honestly, all of us have been incredibly patient. Update 3. Okay, so I think Melissa has returned to California because it's been a couple of days and we haven't heard from her at all. Which is strange because we expected her to lash out after her arrest, but my dad talked to a few people who said they saw her heading toward the airport the other day, so I'm assuming she left. It's honestly a huge relief that she's gone now because I was genuinely afraid she would try something drastic to get our attention next. And that's always bad news. I don't know what she's going to do about the whole situation with Greg now because it seems unlikely she'll get help from anyone else after this. I just hope she finds some way to fix her situation and get out of this mess. And no, I'm not being compassionate. It's purely selfish. It's because I know that if she doesn't find a way out, she'll just come back with Greg and create more issues for us. And I really don't want that, so I genuinely hope that either she or Greg finds a job and they're able to support themselves. Either way, at least I won't have to hear from her for a couple of weeks, and I'm relieved that this nightmare is finally quiet for now.